Today is August 7th, Friday at 5 dark hour. Anyway, we got Andy back.
Good morning.
And he's gonna do some magic with mobile Alabama.
We're gonna answer some. We're gonna talk about a few things.
So if you're not talking, mute your mic, and if you want to talk, raise your hand and let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got you up on one of the 6 screens. As long as I can find you, we're good to go.
Okay.
Sorry we haven't been on in the last few weeks. We've had to do some traveling to Chicago to help out the company up there since the IT director decided to get his knee replaced. So we have been out of pocket for a little while, basically, and relying on others, which has been great. Y'all's contributions have been wonderful. To kind of go where the ChatterBox is, there'll be another release this weekend, including mobile with it. I have been diligently this week working on 2 things, which is getting the classes to work in all 3 environments without an issue, and mobile is the challenge, and we'll kind of go over that a little bit and talk a few of the limitations of the mobile. Second of all, based upon our discussions a few weeks ago, very few weeks ago, but a couple 3 weeks ago, when our friends from France were going through the replication, and I'm going to pick on him just a bit. I'm going to pick on our veterinarian developer out there just a bit. He had gone down a path of looking at the replication. Mr. Flegg went down a path of looking at replication in all 3 environments, and found out that parts of it was not supported in the mobile environment. So let's first kind of give you a run up on where the ChatterBox is and what it's doing. We've coded in all of the newsgroup stuff. It is all there. I've coded in the chat, and I'm looking to do some testing this weekend on that and release that with it. And obviously now I'm working on the mobile to show the news groups and the topics and things like this. Now, this one here more is going to resemble the web style versus deal, because there's no trees, there's no, none of the functionality that you could use on the desktop or even the web now in version 18 is yet available on the mobile device, so we have to be a little bit more simplistic. But you're going to be able to chat. Now, one of the things that did come up with this is, and I thought it was a pretty good idea, in fact, I made a little application just to see if it was possible to work on my phone, and it did, was a widget. So the widget itself, when you talk about a widget for mobile device, there are some limitations. Number one, you can have an image on there, but the only thing is static text fields as you can do on there. It's not going to refresh any more than every 30 minutes, period. I have, that's their refresh rate for it. So in doing that, I was going to go for a new window, do it here, and I was going to do got a wizard, template base, standard. There, I'm going to blank for widget. And there is my little widget. Now you can change the colors and the things that you want on there to be able to show it. And I'm actually doing this for Michael. But I can put my title in there, and it's called a pop-up, and we'll go widget. Pop chat widget. And the details is it has to be certain sizes. Okay. So what we have is no pop-up window. because I don't care about the pop-up window. You have different sizes here that you can set. The size of the widget in cell. Right now it's a 4x2, which is basically a phone widget. If you want a bigger one for a desktop, like the Zoom or the Galaxy 4
tablet,
a tablet, then you can use it. Change that as well. You can do the maximum size. I'm going to leave it as, and then of course you can set the refresh over here, which is set up to be 30 minutes, 1 hour, minimum is 30 minutes. That's the best I can do. Put a preview image on it, but basically this is it. Put a image on one side, of course a very small image on one side, and put a couple of text fields, static fields here to show information. Now whether I fill them in or not, 6 one have done the other. Then when that runs, I can fill in those static information there. And I actually have one running that I'm going to send out, and everybody can get that tomorrow. Okay.
Everybody?
That's just the limitation there of it as it is. So let me go to the alignment here. Side border. Where is it? That's what I want. So I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of static that I can use with that. I come in here, change my description. Let's put the ChatterBox on there for the image. I don't want them. I want no. That's what I want. And I think that should work. Yep. So now I have my ChatterBox image. And I can make these slightly larger. Now, it's exactly the same thing I did on the other one, but I knew we needed to do this here. And what I'll end up doing is I'll put the news groups up there one time, and they'll say there's X number of messages on the news groups, and then you'll be able to then click on a button. And we'll open ChatterBox. That's all there is to it. It's really nothing to it. And that's about as max that you can do with them. Of course, you're going to display information in each one of those statics, but that's about the max you can do with them. Okay. And like I said, I've got one that's already built, so I'm going to send that out tomorrow night as well and give it to a couple people that's been looking for splash screens, or not splash screens, but widget screens for the mobile device, and that'll show you how that works. But the major discussion this morning is going to be over replication, because I think that we need to discuss that more than anything. Let's first go over a few of the concepts of replication in the first place, okay? And then we'll go over the class code that was did. Originally, a couple, 3 weeks ago, we had just been discussing the replication with our friends out of France and PC Soft, and they were more discussing the server-to-server replication versus field-by-field replication. Okay, There are two things that over the years, when you talk about field by field replication, that you can definitely start seeing concepts of how it can work. Number one is integration of SQL and XML is the two biggest things that help. And I'll explain how those two work. The final thing is that you need to have a unique ID coming across all environments. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't have to be the primary key, but it certainly has to be a unique ID. So the advent of the GUI ID, that the GUID from years ago certainly helped that situation. And instead of trying to make something up, now you've got something that works off of any machine that's out there. Now, they're saying that they're not supported necessarily on mobile device, on the iOS, but there are Objective-C that will create it for you, or you can, you know, kind of homegrown your own like we used to do when we needed one dealing with like a date time stamp and a machine ID or something like that, and move it forward. So the components of what you really need to know, or what you really need basics of replication, field by field replication, is you need a unique ID that would work on any machine and tell you, in essence, which machine and which record it is, or which record it is, and not conflict with anything else. You need XML, in my opinion, and you need SQL, in my opinion. And what we're going to go through here is the reasons why we need each one of them, as well as how we're going to set up this class to do replication. In my week-long experiments with this replication, it will work fine from a desktop standpoint. It will work fine from a web standpoint. You will have to do some modifications. We will have to do some modifications to make it work from a mobile standpoint. And the reason is certain commands are not supported as yet by PC Soft, and we're going to go through those commands here in a few minutes. So we got a couple of choices. If we still want it generic enough to handle anything I throw at it, then the mobile is slightly different, and actually the replication is not done on the mobile device. It is not determined on the mobile device, is what I should say. It is done there, but it's not determined there. So I'm going to show you how we can handle that. But over the years, in working with different languages, and I've worked with about 7 different flavors of them, there has not been a very decent facility to understand what you have inside a particular file structure. What's happening inside the file structure, what kind of file structure it is. You usually have to manually define all of your file structures to do this. And in defining all your file structures, then that causes a maintenance nightmare, and basically you don't have a generic replication class. You have a replication class for this file. You have a replication for this file, for this file, for this file. And it gets to be a real pain in the butt. So last week, when John expressed his disappointment in not seeing that replication was coming out of the mobile device, I gave Glenn Rathke a quick call, and I told him, I said, you know, Glenn, I remember you kind of messing with the H file, or the you know, layouts and stuff, and determining, you know, what's going on in the file structures and stuff via the H file. And he said, yeah. I said, do you think that you can tell me the differences between the previous record and the current record in H file and code that up? And he said, sure. So what he did was actually create a set of procedures and methods in his examples. So if you don't have them, that's where I call somewhat of a fool. But he created just exactly the same thing to compare these fields and know what values of the fields changed from the previous record, from the previous view of the record to the current view of the record, and store them into an array. And I want to thank Glenn for doing that. The second thing is that I went a bit further with that, and I grabbed the example code that he had, and we started looking at, let's move this forward to work with any file structure to any file structure. Okay, so this class doesn't matter whether you're coming from Hyperfile Client Server to Postgres, or from Postgres to Hyperfile, or from Hyperfile to Hyperfile, or whatever it may be. It doesn't matter to it because it doesn't care. But there are certain things that we need to know about every file and every layout, and let's go through those first. Number one, we need to know each of the field names that we're working with. That's what this is for. We need to know the type of field. I need to know whether it's date, time, numeric, integer, whatever it may be. I need to know the value of the field that we're going to deal with. Okay? I also need to know whether this particular field is the primary field, and I also need to know whether it is the GUI ID field, because in some instances they don't use the GUI ID as a primary field. So that's the only reason I added that. Number two is that I have a replication log structure, and this is actually the structure that I will be sending back and forth to the web service. I'm going to use a web service for my replication. I think that is the smartest thing to use. I cannot stress this enough. Pete and I have gone through this on more than one occasion. We really feel the only viable method currently, as of today, 7:45 a.m., 8/9/2013, of working with mobile devices through WINDEV Mobile is through web services. It's the only viable way in my book. You do not have, you have more flexibility there than anything. So that's the reason why I want to use web services. So I'm going to have this structure, and that's the structure I'm going to send to the web service when I need to either get or send them changes that I've done on the mobile device. Doesn't matter when or how old it is. Now, some of the rules with that. We need to have a sysid. This is a logging sysid. This is only locally. I don't care if it's the same sysid on the web service up there. It doesn't matter to me. It only needs to be local, and that's fine because I need them in sequence. I need to know the table name that I'm going to be updating. I'm going to need to know the GUI ID field name that I'm going to be using. The data XML, this field here, is a serialization of the field changes. So if there are five fields that change, that will hold an XML representation of all 5 of those fields. Okay, and I'll show you how that works. I want to know the date it was processed. I want to know the UTC date time of when this was updated. So that way it can all be in, I can make sure that they're in order by UTC date time. And I need to know the action type, or the action that's going to be done on this record, whether it's going to be add, change, or delete. That's what I need to know. Okay? In doing that, literally what I've got in this is I've got a log of whatever I changed on a particular record. Whether it is 25 fields in the record, I only changed 2 fields, or I changed 15, the XML is going to hold those changed records only, is all it's going to hold. This is why the SQL comes in. The replication class itself, I need to know a field list. I need to have data to replicate. I need to have the data record. I need to have the data to process. This is how we're going to process stuff. I'm going to have an array of field changes. I'm going to have the record structure of those field changes. I'm going to also have an OData, which is the old data, well, this is the pre-record. and I'm going to have an array of those field changes. So let's kind of go through. Those are just some of the fields we got. Let's kind of go through this. Now, one of the things, or one of the many wonderful things that WINDEV and PCSoft has provided is they have several variable or several functions built into their system that allows them to, or allows you to get the full-on definition of whatever variable you sent to it. Now, let's kind of qualify this, because Pete and I use the analysis to get to the data, but we use classes for all of our field and screen manipulation. Okay, and this is part of what we're going to be teaching there at DevCon is I'm going to take you through the classes from base all the way up, and we're going to show you why we use them and how they benefit you over and above you know, straight file access. But because we use the classes, the definition, the variable definition, variable description here, and def is definition and get definition is very, very wonderful. I mean, when I ran across them, because I was looking to see if I couldn't get a definition of the record, I ran across this and started researching into it, and what it does is it doesn't matter whether it's a structure you're sending it, a class you're sending it, or a file you're sending to it, it will give you the definition of whatever object. Okay? It will give you the definition of the object. Okay, Dan, you use the analysis to get to the data, and you use the classes. We use the classes to manage the data, Dan. Display it to the screen, manage the data, put the business rules and stuff in. So the definition, this variable description and definition, hand in hand.
Let me try another way. What he's saying is the only thing that talks to the analysis is the classes. The rest of our project talks to the classes talk to the analysis. Is another way to think about it.
That's true. And the analysis is the only way to get to the actual file. Well, you can get to the files without the analysis, but for the most part, any kind of add, delete, all has to go through the analysis. Okay, so when you're talking about the definition, what it's going to do is give you a set of variables and a set of definitions, an enumeration of each one of the items inside that variable. And we're going to step through this with the trace and everything and show you what it looks like, okay, when we get done with this explanation. And what I'm looking for is I get the definition of the variable, and I want to know whether it's a global variable or it's inherited, because I use classes. Those would not be the case. Those will both be false if you're using a file or a structure, but they may be true on a class. So I'm trying to make sure. And what I do now is I append the data field, because I'm passing two fields. I'm passing the current data that I'm sending. I'm passing the old data record that I'm comparing it against, and I'm passing what kind of action I want: add, change, or delete. So I got the current view, the old view, and what action I'm doing, and I'm appending that to it so I can get the value of that. I'm assigning the field name to my record. I'm getting the field type, and the var definition name actually gives me the type of whether it's numeric, string, whatever it needs to be. And then because I can use indirection to get me the value of that field. Okay? Now the last thing I'm doing is I'm doing a validate change. I've gone in there with my new record, the one I updated, and I'm saying, okay, now let's see what's going on here, and let's find out whether I actually have a change. Okay? In here, I've done an array sort on the field name. I'm looking for it. If I don't find it at all, then I'm out of here because there is none. I'm checking to see whether or not that I'm going ahead and presetting my record for GUI ID or primary. And if I find the record, The old data now is in my, I'm moving the old data from my array or my file structure into, let me see. I need to explain this a little bit better because I know we're going to fast get past people. There is a, we've got an array of the data out of the file. We got a file listing. We got all the records. Records 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay? And that is showing us what the record looks like when you display it in a list box. So when I got a list box up there and I see Andy, 1153 Belmont Drive, Cookeville, Tennessee, and my phone number, that is the array of data, or that is the old data, what it looks like right now. Okay? Then I do an edit, and I change Andy Stapleton to Howard A. Stapleton. And what has to happen? Well, I'm going to update that file. I'm going to update that array structure and says this is what it looks like now. In the meantime, before anything happens, I literally have a view of the record structure as it looks previous to my changes, and I have a view of the record structure after my changes. Okay? And for all of those that have been in other languages, you know you have what it looks like now, and then you have what's in your edit fields, basically, before you do a source to screen. That's what you're doing. Okay? So now we're sitting here with the old version and the new version of that record. And I'm going to go find that record that I'm changing. I'm going to go find that record and say, okay, I need to go find you in the file, and I need to compare you to the current changes. That's what I'm doing. Everybody got that so far? All right. If anybody doesn't, scream. So I'm checking now to see whether the field values match and whether the field names match. That's what I'm looking for. I'm checking to see whether it matches what I assign as my GUI ID for this one. And I'm checking to see whether it matches what I assigned as my primary field for this one. If that is the case, if they don't equal each other, if the field values don't equal each other, I'm going to add that record to the array, to my local array. This is a changed field within the record. This is a changed field within the record. Now, if we're doing an update, we're always going to have a GUI ID field, but it ain't going to change on an update. A GUI ID field or the primary key field should not change on your update, period. So I still have to have those in there in order to know what they are for the replication. So you add this bit of code here underneath to say, okay, well, if this field is the GUI ID or this field is the primary, then we can go from there. Okay. So that way I can always make sure that my XML list will have the GUI ID field in it and will have the primary key field in it because I need both of those no matter what. So that's all it's doing. So in essence, the biggest part is right here where it's comparing field by field from the previous version of the record before my changes to the current version of the record that has my changes. And for every field value that do not match, for every field value that does not match, I'm going to add it to my array data. I'm going to add it to my record up here, which is this field changes is what I'm going to add it to. That's what we're adding it to, is this set of arrays. Okay? Now, once that's done, what do I have left? Well, what I've got is, let me get here, I'm sorry, kind of bouncing around. What I have here now is only the records in that array, or only the fields in that array that have changed. In other words, if there are 15 fields and I only change 2 of them, then there will be only 2 records. There will only be 2 fields in that array that changed. That's all there is to it. We're done. Now that tells me there that I've got all of those. I've built the record and it's ready to go. Once that's done and it's validated, I've got the array. We're off and running. Okay. The last thing to do is we're going to add that. We're going to add that array. We're going to add that to the local file. That's what we're going to do. Just see here. Okay. Let me get the right spot here. I'm sorry. I'm kind of scrolling around here trying to figure out exactly where I'm at. Build a record. Let me get to my global, and then I'll be able to know what I'm doing. All right. Okay. Once that's done, we've now saved it locally. We're going to do a serialization and save that locally. I know you're here. Just a second, guys. I'm sorry. I'm kind of... there it is. Okay. All right. We're going to call a method called manage updates. We stored everything where we need to be, and now what we're going to do is we're going to end up taking this, and we're going to send it to our web service. Okay? File to array is a perfect way to do that. Basically, I get the entire replication, and I put it to the array, and I'm ready to go. I'm going to sort it by the UTC date time and date processed. Okay? So now, what I've gotten now is that I've ended up with the array of changes field by field, and I need to send it to the web service along with everything else I've changed so it can process those. So I need to make sure it's by UTC date time, so that way it's not out of order. I want all of them to be in order, and I also want it to be within date processed within. Why? Because in essence, if you're in 4 different devices, I've got 3 mobile devices, 1 central, and 2 desktops. And if the mobile's out there for 3 days out of service, literally other changes can be made during those 3 days that he won't know about, that they won't know about. So you could have quite a few records already processed that needs to be processed again when he puts in his. And there's a couple, 2 or 3 things you got to look at. And I'm going to use John's example of the veterinarians because that's been a good discussion out there on the chat room anyway, and it's a good way to kind of see how this works. You got a group of vets that work together. You got 2 in the office working small animals, and you got 2 out of the office that run around the countryside doing the large animals, bovine and horse. And actually, since I have a friend of mine that's a vet, this kind of fits in with things I already know anyway. So he gets out there with his mobile device to Joe Blow, and a farmer, and he says, "Listen, I got 30 head of calves that we need to, cut and give them shots, and I've got a horse over here that's got got a throat issue that we got to deal with." So he brings up the guy's records, and he sees that he's got there. Well, he's got to add in. He's got to add in that he's going to tag and produce tags for ear tags for 30 calves. That's one thing he's going to do. So he's going to have 30 brand new records in there, and then he's going to bring up the guy's horse, and he's going to work with it. Well, he may well be there all day long and then go to another place and do that one the next day and never see the office for 2 days. Okay. In the meantime, somebody else the next day goes back out to that same horse, that same guy, the same horse there, and deals with, another deal on his throat because he says, hey, I dealt with it, but there needs to be some more done. He needs to bring something from the office. So now you got 2 records on that same horse in 2 different areas, and both items being changed. So since he's been gone for 2 days, all of this information is on his mobile, and it's not in the web service. The UTC date time is how that's solved. So you want everything in sequence. You want everything correctly. But if mobile device 1 makes it back quicker than mobile device 2, and you can actually get them out of sync that direction. And I'm hoping that you guys can kind of follow along. I can have records in mobile device 1 that is also in mobile device 2 that have 2 different changes. But mobile device 1 was done after mobile device 2 was done. So you got to reload those records. You got to redo them. I may have to flowchart this out for everybody. Okay? That's right. Date creation and date change. You could do that, yes, but the UTC date actually covers both of those, Carlos. Okay? Now, you may have those on the main database. You would have those on the main database for sure, but the UTC date, from my standpoint, is the #1 reason how you get those in order with each other. Now, you can make them a UTC date, obviously. Both of them are UTC dates, and you'll be fine. Okay. Yeah. Well, if you get, here's the reason why you got to use the UTC, Carlos. In what we're dealing with here, what we're working with, we're going to be working with people that may be in multiple time zones. Okay. We're going to be working with people in multiple parts of the world, i.e., ChatterBox is going to be replicating from Australia to America, from South Africa to America, things like this. So you're way, way out there is what you're doing, okay? But see, even an example of a vet, I'm 30 miles from a different time zone. And let's say that I'm running a mobile device that uses Verizon as a carrier. So I go to 30 miles away, and my records would grab a total different time, and it'd be an hours later than what mine is right now. And that would be wrong. So if I have UTC date time, even if I'm 35 miles away in the Eastern time zone, my date time would be correct when I brought it back to the office. Yeah, then if you do that, Carlos, and you have the location of your customer on the record, the only thing that you're doing at that point in time is that you're now going to say, well, his location is 35 miles away, so I got to subtract an hour, or I got to add an hour. There's no reason to do that because you can go back that way and just return it from UTC date time both directions. Because you can do UTC to local, local to UTC. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. What you're doing is absolutely, I mean, you can do that. You can certainly do that. And this is not the data you're storing, and let me clarify that, Carlos. This is not the date that you're storing inside the record. This is the date of the record changes. Okay? You can store whatever date you want inside the record. It makes no difference to me because I have no knowledge about how you define your record structure. Okay? This is just for replication. This is the date of the replication is what it is. So don't confuse the two. Okay. I'll let you finish that typing. Okay. Now, when I get these, it would be the date. Well, it would be the date of the actual change of the record, or basically the date of. Okay, and don't. This is the only part that can confuse you. We're not talking about the record that you have for a customer. We're talking about a collection of the changes of those records. That's right. That's right. You're right, Chris. You're right. Yeah, it's date and time. It absolutely is date and time. So you may actually, you can make the changes anytime during the day you want. It's just going to say this is when that date was changed. And if you want to store, a standard date time in your record, you can. The array is going to have the UTC date time, so it can be sorted accordingly based upon when it actually happened on UTC. And Dan, I'll actually do that because I think it needs to happen. I think I'm going to do that anyway. Make the lucid charts. Okay. So now let's go through. That's right, Chris. You're absolutely right. So now let's go up to the web servers and say, how are we going to process these things? And part of the problem when you process these things is now you have an order. You have a set of data that you got ordered in. Okay, you've got records, and let me kind of do something here. Might be able to help us out a little bit to understand this. So I want to make sure everybody kind of understands this. I know what I want to do. Second here. We'll use a little bit of deal here. Okay. What we have here is a set of messages that we have in the system right now for the ChatterBox. These have the message sysid, what the parent is, the news group it came from, who it came from, and who it's going to if you want to send it to somebody directly, what the title of the message is, and the full-blown message text, message detail over here. Okay, you'll notice that it's got a message created over here, and it's only got the date. I don't care about the time; it's only the date. So in talking about Carlos's issues, I'm only storing the date as when the message was created. I could care less what time it was created. When I send in from a mobile device, this can happen. If you are dealing with chat messages, then obviously I need to make sure that Chris's message replying to someone else's message does not happen before another message is posted. They got to be in order. They got to be in a reasonable order, so that way it looks like the message is actually flowing. The chat is actually flowing correctly. So UTC time is the only way to do that. But if I'm on a mobile device and I'm doing this, I need to make sure that I'm not I've got the replication to work with to go back and forth when this is placed up there on the system, so that way it all flows correctly from all the news group messages, because I can have an offline news group and make a bunch of replies to it. When I get back online, I'm going to send all those up at once. Okay? So I'm going to send let's say I come in here and I'm going to send this record or edit this record. I'm going to send it up. The changes in here are within that array. It's all within that web service call I just did. It's in that change record structure that I have, and I want to make sure that 15 doesn't come below 17 and on down the line. They got to be in order when I process them. But if I've already processed 17, I don't want to ignore it. So let's say Chris comes in here and he changes the title to this record, and then I come in there and I change the text to that record. In a record-by-record replication, my change coming in second will override the message title. That's number one. We don't want to do that. We only want to change the text. So if Chris changes the title and he goes in first, and I change the text that goes in second because I'm a day or two later, then bottom line, I don't want to override his title. That's number one. That's why we went through the first process of making sure that we only know which fields changed. Okay? That's why we went through that. So now I'm only sending the text and he's only sending the title. Okay, so we're cool on that. But let's say he changed the title and something on the text. And then I changed the text also. The problem with it is that at that point, last in should win. Last in should win every time. Okay? Maybe members would probably be a better one to look at here than this. Prime example. Let's look at. I think this will work greater than everything. Passwords. Last in password should win. So if Chris changes his password, then I come in and change it because he called me and told me to change it. Whoever changed it last should win, period. So by sending this up and doing it by UTC time, even if his is in there, I'm going to look for anything that's processed. And if my UTC time is ahead of that process, I'm going to do mine and process everything for that record after my UTC time. Last wins, Chris. Okay? If I change the title on Tuesday and you change it on Wednesday but don't replicate till Friday, mine would win. And I'll tell you why. And let's go the opposite direction, Chris, with that. You changed it on Wednesday. You changed it on Thursday. I changed it on Wednesday, but didn't replicate till Friday. Yours would win because you were the last. Okay? Now, as far as seeing previous changes, that's a matter, Thomas, of a history thing that you got, okay? If you've got the history to show the changes, then obviously you can do that. But in the way I'm talking from a replication standpoint, if you look at replication from Sybase or you look at replication from other tools, you do have the history of what's changed, certainly, but you don't. Whatever last in wins, period. Okay? So you can certainly code in the factor that you can certainly code in that when you see it, say, hey, this was changed, but he was changed afterwards. You code that in. What I'm dealing with now is just getting the data in there correctly.
That's field by field, though, right, Andy? Not record.
Field by field. And that's the purpose behind this, is because I don't want to overwrite the entire record with whatever I did. I only want to write in the changes of what I did. Okay? So you keep the history in there. Now, one of the things that I've set up on this is how long do you keep the history? How long do you let a log file grow? That's a funny thing. I've set this thing up to you put the number of days. Yeah, you're correct. You will cut down the bandwidth for sure, because you're only sending the changes of whatever fields you want. But also I have set up on the log file to only store X number of days. So if I say, hey, listen, I never have anybody offline more than 10 days. They got to be in within 10 days. So bottom line is I don't want to keep any history past 14 days or 30 days. Whatever I've got in there, it doesn't really matter. But let's say we do that. Everybody has to sync within 2 weeks, period, or everybody has to sync within a month, period, no matter what, that they cannot be offline more than a month. If they're offline more than a month, tough. Okay? So one of the processes I put in here is to go ahead and, if the date valid, history date, if that's valid, I'm going to go through there and get rid of anything that is less than the date that I want on the date processed. That's what this part is first. That's to clean up all the old data. History date is a variable inside this class. You set it. So let's say I want to, whatever it may be, you can set up your date to be 10 days back, 20 days back, whatever it is. It's a calculation. So it takes the current date minus however many days you got and gives you your history date, and we'll clean up any old stuff. So that also keeps your log file down. Now, it wouldn't be entirely impossible, smart, say, keep me on 30 days worth of history and keep a backup of the previous 30 days worth of history. It's probably a smart thing to do. But one of the things that you don't want to get into is, a couple of terabytes of log data on your customer site because nobody's maintaining it. Okay, so that kind of settles that right there. Okay. Then it is, here's the key part about this is, and those that have done reports before can probably understand why we go down this path. The array of data that I've got to process can hold several tables. You can have 100 tables in this thing that you're processing. It's not just a one-to-one basis. Inside the log is every table change that has happened to your analysis. Every table change. So you can have 100 tables in there. You could have 200 files in there, however many it is. Now you can specify whether a file is actually going to be replicated or not. In other words, I don't have to replicate everything in my analysis. I only need to replicate 1 or 2. And when this comes under DevCon, by the time we get done with DevCon, you'll see how that works as well, because we'll go through that piece as well. But in this instance here, I need to know, number one, I need to process basically, by table name, whatever the UTC date time is, and then date process. That's what I got to process by. So I'm going to move the entire file to the array, and I'm going to start processing from there. Okay? I'm going to move it there. If I've got a blank in my whole table name, the old adage of this is the table I'm working with until I get to the next table. I'm going to put that in there, and as long as that, I'm going to see if I can ready to process or not. Okay? So the thing I'm checking to see is whether or not I processed the current record. If I have, goodbye. I don't need to do this one because it was processed before any UTC time that needed to be processed. When I finally get past and find one that has not been processed yet, I'm going to start my process. I'm going to add it to my work array. Okay? So I can work with one table, one set of changes, either one or more set of changes to a set of records inside that table. When that's done, because if I got the whole table is no longer equal to the record table that I just read, I'm going to go process that work array. In other words, it's time to run and go and blow. Here's where the SQL stuff comes in. SQL, and it doesn't matter whether you're using Hyperfile Client Server, Sybase, anything, basically you can use this on anything that uses SQL. It is wonderful for it. Obviously, if you're using the classic, you're going to have to handwrite your own statements. You got no choice. You're going to have to compare each field on your own. You can do that using Glenn's example. Glenn will give you that, you know, if you got his stuff, he has the example of how to do that, to where he can go across that. I'm doing it by SQL only. So in my opinion, you're either going to use Hyperfile Client Server or you're going to use a SQL flavor to do this. There are basically 3 statements I got to deal with: insert, update, and delete. That's the only 3 statements I got to work with. Then I've created each one of them based upon whether it's an add, change, or delete that's coming from that action type in that record. Whether I'm going to add it, change it, or delete it is all I need to know. From there, this is where I've got the data XML. Remember, I said the fields that we changed, the field and field values that we changed, is what I need to have here. So that comes in that one string, which is data XML, and I'm going to deserialize it. That's what I'm doing here, is deserializing it, basically taking it out of there, putting it into an array. I'm taking it from the XML and putting it into the array now. And what I have now is a list box or a queue, an array of just the field names, the field types, and what was changed. Okay? Now here's where the cool part is. This is what's happening. If I send this that I want a field list, in other words, I just want every name of the field with commas in between. That's all I want, is every name of the field with commas in between. I'm going to do a RepVal plus the comma, field name. This is conditional concatenation, so if it's the first one, I won't get the comma. And what I'll have then is a listing of each one of the field names. On an insert, that's what you need first. The second thing is, as long as it's not the primary, I need to find out whether or not it's a string or numeric value, basically Boolean, whatever it needs to be. And I'm going to either put quotes around it if it's a string value, or I'm going to leave it as it is raw. And that's, again, this is the values coming back if I want the values. Those two are used in conjunction with each other for the insert statement. There's the fields. That's the field list. That's the values of the field list. And for those that have worked with SQL any at all, you can understand what you're getting. The first field has got all of the values or all the field names that you have in it, and the values are set, you know, in the second list box. And that's what I've got right there. And boom, I end up with an insert statement that I can send to my SQL. Now, an update, that's different. An update now comes with field name equals, field name equals, field name equals, field name equals, where primary equals primary, right? So I'm going to go get the field update and the where clause is the two things I need now out of this. Field update, I'm going to actually set the field name equal to the field value if it's a string, or the field name is equal to the field value if it's not a string. So I'm setting up each one of the update statements, and what it would look like in the end is something like this. The insert would look like insert into members, mem name, mem nickname. We'll just shorten this up. Values, Andy. That's what the insert would result from in there. And the update would come in, update members, set mem nickname equal Andy, or member sysid equals 1. That's what the update string would look like. And I can take that. The other thing it would come up with if it had multiple fields is mem name equals Andy. Okay? So that code right there, this field update, would result in this itself, is what it would happen. That's what the two things would come up with. The where clause, what it's going to do is look for the GUI ID. This is why the GUI ID is important. Because in order to do replication, if you're using a numeric, even 8-byte sysid, the ones I created locally on the mobile device is not going to be the same as the ones that are currently on the master database, and the master database may already have that sysid. So you got to use the GUI ID so they are absolutely unique, period. So I'm looping through and saying, well, give me the GUI ID because that's what I'm going to make match. The field name equals the GUI ID, and I'm putting quotes around it because as far as I'm concerned, it's a string. Why do you put quotes around it? Because in SQL, okay, if the field has quotes around it, we're going to have to do some adjustments, Roberto. We got to look for that, and I haven't put that in yet. I understand what you mean. Basically, what we'd have to do is do a replace on it, and do a replace to either take out the single quote or wrap it in quotes around there, so that way it won't blow up the insert. But you're right, Roberto. I just hadn't got that far. But the quotes around it, is because I don't, when I'm building that, I've only got 1% sign. I've only got one substitute up here for the set. So I'm putting every field in there with commas in between them. Just like you saw up here, if I went and got the field updates, I would be bringing back that line right there is what I'd be bringing back. Mem nickname equals Andy, comma, mem name equals Andy Stapleton. So both of them be there together. And I would need to make sure that I've got quotes around those string values, otherwise the SQL statement would fail. Okay. The last thing I do is I'm going to seek from the data, the replication data, or my log file. I'm going to go get the log file, and I'm going to find that sysid that I just entered. Okay. Yes, there is, Robert. I'm going to go seek that log file record, and I'm going to mark it that it's been processed. Okay. The other thing is, if you also look, I am marking it with a UTC date time. Everything is UTC date time for the replication only. For the replication only. Okay? So nobody can get confused. UTC is always better for the replication. Absolutely. I'm kind of very adamant about the UTC date time for the replication. Okay? I just don't think there's any other way to really do this. Now the thing about it is that even if somebody else had changed something earlier than you, the reason why the last in wins is because unless the date processed is earlier, the date inserted and processed is earlier than what you just did, yours is going to run, and then everything for that record afterwards will run again. Everything for that record afterwards would run again. And that allows you to make sure that in sequence is just like everybody was on the same exact database. They would all have the records as if somebody entered them in the exact same time, as they entered them in. To me, replication, I mean, there's a lot of people that think of replication as a big bugaboo thing out there. But basically, think about it from the standpoint of everybody's on the same system. Okay? Everybody's on the same system. You're all on the same database. If everybody's editing records in the database, number one, there's not that many times that you actually edit the exact same record. Most of the time, you edit one record the other day, one day, and the guy may edit the same record the next day, okay, to be honest with you. But in essence, most of the stuff is new stuff going in. Not very often is actually corrections, okay? So multi-user, this is all dealing with how the multi-user consideration, because if everybody was on the same system for 3 days, any changes of the records would be in order of however it was changed, and whoever entered it in last would win anyway. So whether you disconnect one person and have him go offline for 2, 3, 4 days and then come back in, when his time and his records go in there based upon the time that he's done them, everything afterwards has to run also. Does everybody understand what I'm saying there? If you don't, say so.
Hey,
okay? Think about it.
The one thing
let's talk about it like a checkbook. Let's talk about it like a checkbook. If you're in your QuickBooks, okay, and you insert, you know, your wife's been putting in checks for the last 4 days, and then you come in there and insert one 5 days ago, what happens? Every record after your insert, when you put the date 5 days ago, every record afterwards gets recalculated to have the correct balance at the bottom. Your line item balances matches on the next record and the rest of them all the way down. So in other words, it has to process every record after yours. This is the exact same thing I'm doing here. I'm making sure that every record that was changed for this particular one is processed after I've inserted or changed it myself. Okay? I think that's probably the easiest way to understand that is the checkbook method of inserting a check and then having to recalculate the balance, you know, running balance afterwards. It's exactly the same situation, exactly the same process. Does that help?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about that vet, right? And say that you're vet 1, I'm vet 2, and I'm behind on my paperwork. And even though I did my work the day before yours, I just wrote the, you know, I posted my records in my mobile. I guess what you're saying is the date time recorded is when the event happened, so that it should be right? Not when I sat down that night in the hotel room doing the records, because mine would be late.
It's still going to be late. I mean, but you know, if you put in yours an hour after somebody else done it, you're last in. Your record is going to go in next.
Even though the work I did on the same horse that somebody else did was after him, but I'm behind on my paper.
Yeah, that could be. That's entirely possible. But it's the same way as if, you know, you both drove into the office and he got there 2 hours before you did. It's the exact same process, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it is. It's whenever you put the information in.
Yeah. That's right. It's whatever you put the information in. And here's the deal about it, okay? You're going to occasionally run into, okay, you're going to occasionally run into where you actually override something that was not supposed to be overridden because he changed it, or, you know, however that happens. But that happens now. I mean, that happens in day-to-day operations. Oh, you changed that? You wasn't supposed to, because we changed it 2 days ago to what it was really supposed to be, and you didn't know that we were supposed to be that way. It happens anyway. You just correct it and you're on. Most of the times when you're talking about like vets, or you're talking about you know, checkbook things like this, what you're doing is you're putting in new entries. He's putting in new notes. He's putting in new transactions. He's doing things like this, and you're doing a lot more insert than update.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You really are doing a lot more insert than update.
The only time is like if you have a customer and you might change their phone number or something, and yeah, but you know that's like strange situations.
You haven't. Well, okay. Let's say he done that. You're out there on the field, and he says, "Yeah, I got a new cell phone number. Here it is." So you put it in your mobile device. So you're not going to show up in the office for 3 days, and he calls up the next day and say, "Listen, your guy out here was out here yesterday and working with this horse." And we're going through this, and the gal up there says, "Okay, well, let me verify your information." He said, "Yeah, well, I changed my cell phone number." So she changes it too. Okay? What's going to happen? He's going to come in with the UTC date earlier, and her change is still going to happen, even though it's exactly the same. You know,
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? So you're just really not going to have that much where I'm going to change it to one number and you're going to change it to another number, last in win.
So his replication information would be gone after so many days, right? Even though somebody's... I mean, when you...
Well, I don't think that... Yeah, because I really don't think that you can log your changes. And there are people that want to log changes. But how long do you keep them?
Mm-hmm. I guess it depends on your business.
You know, how long do you need to keep them? How long? To me, unless you have an overriding legal requirement to keep changes to records over X period of time, most of the time you already have that built into your system, and it doesn't matter whether you're using replication or not. It's already there. So if I'm having to say that I need to keep the records, and if I was doing that, okay, let's say that I am in I'm in the medical field, and they say you must keep 5 years of records and record changes for every client you have. It would be a nightmare, but let's say you have to for HIPAA, some new regulation at Obamacare. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to put triggers on my database to do an XML of the record previous and afterwards, and put a date time stamp on that. And I'm going to store it to a database over there that says, this is the table name, this is the time and date that it was changed, and this is the user. And then one more field, which is what I call varchar max if I'm using MS SQL, or a character varying on Postgres, but it's nothing but a huge string that holds the XML of what the record looked like. That's all I need. Because literally I can bring up that record, that XML of that record, and show the differences in a heartbeat. Okay? Can you use delete file? Yes.
No, he meant
Mark,
Delta. He meant Delta to change.
Yeah, you need to do the HTTP to do that, yeah. Go ahead and say that again, Arnold.
He meant Delta file, the change.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm keeping the Delta file is what it is. But see, even my replication, because if I use something like Postgres or MS SQL or something like that, or even Hyperfile, because you can write triggers in Hyperfile client server, what I'm going to do there is I'm going to use that to do the logging on the master database. I could care less whether that's logged locally. I want to know. I want it logged on the master database because legally that's where I got to keep it. So the only thing I need to know in my replication is if something really craps out for whatever reason, I need to be able to pull back in the replication if necessary and see how things were done and make the corrections. It's nothing more than that. Change log and those kind of stuff I would handle totally different. This is no other reason is to get the data from different devices incorrectly into my main database and from my main database out to those environments. That's all I wanted to do.
Mark has a question, or he has his hands raised.
That's true. You can certainly do that, Carlos. You can use the H-file journalization. You're right.
Yeah, Mark, what's up?
They do have that, don't they? That's a nice little feature, too.
Journalistic.
Then you got your history of what was changed, just as simple as anything else, and you're off and running.
So is the delete little trickier with the replication? Because that's like permanent, or do you mark things deleted?
Well, it kind of depends. There's no such thing as, well, unless you hand code it. In other words, you got something in most SQL databases to say that this is marked for deletion for later. The only one that has the mark delete is Hyperfile has it in our environment. That's the only one that has that. So you can do that, certainly. You know, that's been around for a long time in different environments. I've never really seen a use for it, other than the fact is if somebody made a mistake, and bottom line, 9 times out of 10 when somebody made a mistake like that, you should have coded your database better in the first place, because you shouldn't have allowed them to delete it. Okay? That's the way I kind of see it.
But as far as
because if I delete a customer,
Arnold, as far as the activity, it goes back to exactly like we were talking about with the updates. What would happen in the real world? Your delete would happen first, then somebody would try to update afterwards. Record's not there to be deleted. Therefore, the update wouldn't take place. So that same scenario of first in, you know, first action wins even applies in a delete situation.
I thought the last one wins.
Well, that works on updates. That only applies to updates, Arnold. Because the bottom line deal is I'm not going to insert the record again to delete it. So if somebody deleted it yesterday and then you tried to replicate it, that's just going to fail. It doesn't make any difference because they got rid of the record, period.
So update, last one wins, insert and delete, first one wins.
Yeah, because nobody's going to insert the same record twice.
Well, maybe because, you know, the secretary, like you said, gets a phone call from Joe Blow and you inserted it in your phone, but it never got in yet. So who wins?
Right.
Well,
then she would win.
A duplicate records. Because there's
well,
no
yes and no, because
make sure that you're not inserting the same customer twice.
It would attempt to be a duplicate record because you wouldn't have it would be a duplicate record because your GUI IDs wouldn't match, and there's no way for it to know. So you would see the duplicate record there, and you would have to clean it up.
But again, go back to applying what would happen if you were in the same office. If you're in there and you insert Joe Blow and she's out there at the front desk inserting Joe Blow, you're going to have 2 Joe Blows in the system. It's the same scenario.
Well, the thing is, if you had been in the office already and not syncing later, you would have had Joe Blow in there, and then she would says, "Oh yeah, you're already in here." But when you have replication later, you know, she says, "Oh no, you're not in here yet. Let me add you."
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, occasionally they can still happen, Arnold. There's not a whole lot you can do about that.
I guess you got to
cope with
that's the number of.
Yeah, exactly. If you're in a business environment where that's going to happen a lot, where guys in the field are adding customers, that folks in the office might also be adding customers, then you're going to modify this class for your customer table to add some additional fuzzy logic to handle and avoid those duplicate customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always go in there and do a search for name, address, name and address, and say, hey, wait a minute, you got duplicates in here. Do you want to go any further? Or put it to a temp table and say you have some issues with it. But yeah, the whole idea about the class is not to black box it in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I understand that. I mean, my situation would be like invoicing, right? Like I don't want to invoice the same thing, but if you do have multiple information that I can check for and say, hey, this looks like you had this put in before, at least you have some kind of flag saying, "Do you sure you want to add this?" So I think I get it. Hey, Tim wants to say something real quick. Tim, go ahead.
Okay, I took my mic off mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead and speak louder, though.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is that, first of all, a great presentation so far, Andy. But I've got to leave, and all I wanted to say was that I talked to the hotel this morning, and they said that there is still some vacancies at the hotel, and they will accept, or they will honor, the group rate up until they are out of vacancies, because our block has basically expired. So if anyone still wants to register for the conference, you can do it. You can go to our website and sign up, or you can contact me directly and I'll help you sign up. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tim. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hal, as a questioner, Hal, I don't necessarily make a unique key a telephone because I can change my telephone. I really never use anything. I never use anything unique that some user can modify. It's just the rule I have since dirt. If the users can touch it, it ain't the primary key, period. Because the minute users touch it, it goes to hell in a handbasket. They misspell it. They transpose a number. Number of reasons.
There goes my
that.
database.
Okay. Really? Yeah, you can do it. Yeah. Okay. Now let's see this in action slightly here. Okay. I want to kind of show something here before we finish up, because I know it's getting a little bit late and we need to go. What this is basically, I've got the language rec class and language class. This is the record that I'm going to change, and this is the previous record. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to insert English is what I'm going to do. I'm going to insert English. Okay? So let me put a B here. We're going to step through this. All right. Now we're here. Let me debugger. And we go here. Oh, sorry. I forgot to undo my trace statements because I want you guys to see this. Huh? Check out for test anyway. All right, now let's run it. Okay. Now what we're getting here is the definition. You can see I'm getting the definition of the variables. This has the type, what it is, and I'm stepping through each one of them. You can see that it's got language rec class, which is the class that I was using. You remember me saying lang is language rec class? And I get the def type. So now I've got what I've done here now is the definition family and the def type. Now if you look up the types, you can tell what type that is, or whether it's a string, a date, or whatever it is. Okay, type 37 is a class. That's what it is. Okay, so that's a class. Let me continue on with this. Now here's the full definition of what we're getting out of here. It's a language rec class. You can see it's a sysid. A 13 is numeric. So I've got a numeric value right now that I'm looking at is what I'm getting. Let me continue on. I'm going to assign the field name to it, which is now argdata.cblanguage. And I'm going to say, give me the type, which is numeric. And I'm going to get the field value, which is 0, because it's an insert. I'm not going to have anything in that sysid, and I'm going to add it to the line. Now I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to do the same thing. Now this one here is the string. You can see right now it says it's language. It's a 19. 19 is a string, ANSI string, as you can see. And I'm going to go on to the next one. And I'm going to go through the same process. So now my AAR data has 2 field changes in it. It's saying I have a 0 field value because it's an insert, and I have language here. There I go. I'm pretty much good to go now. So now let's go here, step by step. This is the going through every one of the other fields is what this is going through in the class. Let me just make sure that yeah, it's going to go to here. So I'm going to continue on, and now I'm going through the old data. And here's where things get interesting. So now if I look in there, oops, I'm done. I finished. Let me run that again. Okay. I need to stop it here is where I need to do it. Okay. Now let's see here. Step. Let's open up. Okay. We open up that record, you'll see that we only got 1 field that changed. In the comparison of the two, the only field that changed was the 1 field that we inserted, which is English. Roberto, that's the way it defined in there. I think they're still using the French layout of it is what it is. So now that language record has 1 field in it that's being changed. That's it. I'm done with it. That's all the fields that got changed. Everything else now is based upon me sending that to the system. So this has gone through every one of those and fixed it. I think it just stays the same. I hadn't even messed with it because I can read definition. So this checked the language record and says only 1 field changed, and here's the field that changed. That's all we did. Now, what's going to happen is next Friday, we're going to take this. We've done through this one, and we've probably got a little bit going with it, but we're going to take it the next step, and we're going to have the log file and everything in it, and we're going to run some tests through it this week, and we'll have some data to show next Friday on how the replication is working with the system. And what this will be able to do then is you'll see how you can change records, and it will show the changes in those records and how those things will be on the UTC time and move forward. We should be able to flash out everything on this by the time DEFCON comes in and be ready for anybody that wants to start using it by then. Okay, that's at the end of this month, basically in about 2 or 3 weeks is what it is. And it should be in good shape then for anybody to use. And I will write in a little example program of setting it up for both the web service side and the receiving side. Now, probably that'll happen after DEF CON. I really don't have enough time to do it ahead of time, but I will write a little example web service and research time, to do this, so that way you can basically send it and work with it. Okay. Is everybody totally confused by now? Or we need some. But I want to be able to get down this path that you are going to be able to. Now, let me talk to you about the mobile, though. Let me talk to you about the mobile. Mobile does not support definition. Okay, it does not support the functions definition and variable definition in the system. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do for mobile for this. I'm going to actually still use the same class, but it's going to have one more method. And that one method is going to store the entire old record and the entire new record. It's not going to compare the two against each other. And the reason behind that is since there's no way for me to know the tables on your mobile device to be able to do the definition, the only thing I can do is store the entire thing. Okay? So what you'll end up doing is sending you'll send the entire record structure with the table name defined, and when it goes up to the web service, it'll do the comparison there and write out only the changes. So the replication log would be kept at the web service by itself. Does that help?
So you're pushing whatever you write on the mobile to a centralized log, and then you process from there?
Yeah, I'm going to have to. The thing about it is that the only thing I'm going to get from, since I cannot define, I can't automate. You could write it manually if you wanted to. I mean, there's no doubt you could write each field, each table, whatever you want it to be in there. I choose not to do that because literally I could take the class, the structure, okay, that's there. I can serialize the structure and send the entire structure, the old and new structure, directly to the web service. Okay? So if I do that, then I can compare the two of them up there like I want to. We're using all the commands that PCSoft has and solve the problem. Okay? So it's going to be a lot heavier from the mobile device, but as far as bandwidth is concerned, you're right, Roberto. But if I can't compare the two, or if I choose not to manually compare the two, because you would have to manually code your comparisons is what you would have to do, Roberto. You could just send the entire structure, both of them up there, and let it compare them up on the web service.
And all this,
and I don't think it's much different.
Mobile offline.
That is true. It only applies if you're using the mobile offline. So you're going to send, in my opinion, you're going to send the record structure. The way I kind of look at it is you're going to send them anyway up there because whether it's now or whether it's in 15 minutes or whether it's interim, you're going to send it up there anyway to do the updates. It's just what all you send up. You could, Chris, you can compare field by field, but you're going to have to write that. You would have to write that because there's no way for me to use the functions, this functionality here that they provide to get definition on the mobile devices yet. They don't have that. So my thoughts is I'd just take the record and I would put them both in the data XML, just put them both in there, have two record structures in there and send them up there and then decipher it up on the web service side. No, Chris, I'm going to tell you, when I get done with this, it won't. If you want to only send the fields that are changed, yes, you would have to do that. What I'm going to do is genericize it so that way you don't have to do that. Chris. It just won't compare the fields on the mobile device. It'll compare the fields on the web service. See what I mean?
Again, Chris, it sounds like you think we're talking about the entire time you're using your mobile app. If you're connected with your mobile app, you're using the web service and all the replication is happening up on the web service, and you're not doing all this. The only time you're doing all this is if you're using your mobile device offline with your local database and then connecting later to transmit your changes.
So it's real time if you're connected. And
they're one and the same.
If you're connected, there is no replication on the mobile side because you're talking to the web service, so you're actually talking to the server, and it's making the changes and managing everything there. There is no bandwidth on your side. It's just when you go into an offline mode where you're working on a local copy of your database on the mobile device, then when you reconnect, it has to send that payload up to the server so that the server can say, okay, what all did he change? I need to apply those changes. And all that processing is being offloaded to the server, but in order to accomplish that, you have to send the before and after images of any records you changed so that the server can do the processing.
And that might be in Wi-Fi by that time.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're talking about when you get back to the office or whatever. So one, you're on Wi-Fi, and two, yes, there's going to be some bandwidth there, but in that situation, I don't know that you necessarily want your mobile device doing that heavy of a field-by-field comparisons and processing, because the other thing that mobile devices don't have are screaming processors that your server has. So, you know, you get back to the office, connect to Wi-Fi, upload everything to the web service, and let it do the processing and decide what needs to be applied to the replicated database.
And the deal is, when you're back in the office, you shouldn't be like on a slow Wi-Fi anyway. You should be pretty quick.
Exactly.
You know?
The best world
is replication bidirectional. How you're right, it is bidirectional. It's just which side and which methods you use in this class. I will have it go. It goes back and forth right now. The other parts about receiving and sending are here. This manage updates is managing the updates is either if I'm initiating it on the web service or I'm initiating it on the mobile device. It's just which side of the class, you know, which side of the device you're using. That's why there'll be both ways. So it's a little different there. Well, you know, part of it is how, you know, with 100 salesmen out there, massive changes on the server, yes. But do you really want your salesman with a mobile device to run around with your entire database? No. What you do there is you be smart. Let's say in your instance here, I know that you do a lot of oil and gas distributorships. Okay, Chris, nice talking to you. I'll talk to you later. So you go do a lot of oil and gas distributorships. So now you got a guy that's going to do region 5. Well, he's got to visit 12 people over 3 days is what he's going to do. He's going to visit 12 people over 3 days. When he goes in, he says, okay, I'm doing region 5. He goes in there and punches region 5 and only downloads to his mobile device region 5. That's all he's going to do. Now it's local if he goes out of service, but in the meantime, as long as he's still in service, it's still syncing in the background either direction. So let's say then, well, let's go oil field, because my dad was oil field electrician. And there's a lot of times there ain't no service in the oil field. So he goes out there and he's supposed to go on 4 rigs out in the middle of West Texas. So he's going to download only those 4 rigs, and then he's going to go out there, he's going to do whatever job he has to do. He's going to modify his mobile device to do the things that he needs to do. And then he's going to go to the hotel that night, hook up on their little internet, and let it update. Well, he's not going to pull down from the system, 40,000 rigs. There's no reason to do that. He is not going to be able to see that. Now, from the second standpoint, let's say that he's going to go visit 3 rigs today, 4 rigs tomorrow. In your instance there, the guy's going to make a big travel through region 5, 7, and 9. So he's only going to download region 5. He's going to hit a hotel and update everything for region 5 and download region 6, then go on to the next one and on to the next one. He's only going to have enough data on his mobile device. We got to be smart. Only have enough data on his mobile device to manage what he needs to do in the next 1 or 2 or 3 days. Because bottom line is, you only got 32 gigs, 16 gigs, depending upon the mobile device. You may not have the frickin' room. Okay, so let's go to the laptop. You're on a laptop instead. Well, if you're on a laptop instead, you're going to use this code as is. You don't have to worry about whether you can replicate to a mobile device because you're on a laptop. And the laptop, again, you still got the same situation. You got more room. You could put most of the database on there, but you certainly don't have to. You only really need to send them out with the data that they need to go out with. And then if they change that, they can hook up to a wireless, upload their stuff, and down. Okay, so we sell from a central DB of 5,000 to 10,000 records. That's nothing. That's easy peasy, Hal. I don't think that's going to be an issue. We did a mobile device to do inventory, and we put 80,000 records in the inventory, Hal, on the mobile device. Okay, and it took 3 minutes to load the first time with an empty file, 2 to 3 minutes. So I would say that you shouldn't have a problem because we were doing almost 100,000 records on the device. And like I said, the first load was only was 5 to 10 minutes on the outside was the full load. So it wasn't that bad of a problem. Now that's an initial load of the software though. Once it was on there, the only thing that I'm doing back and forth is that I'm looking for changes and updating locally, and then you can go back and forth that way. Kind of depends on how your situation works.
Exactly. It's like everything else. This is the foundation. Now, for your specific business situation, you might take this foundation and build some extra specific pieces on it to handle your situation. But here's the foundation. This is that first month, 2 months worth of work that you no longer have to do.
Anything else, guys?
Doesn't look
okay.
Good. So are you coming back next Friday?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to come back next Friday with more stuff on this. We'll probably have a full-blown demo of it by then with the data in the files that we can show and show how we got it there. Because I did promise replication for DEF CON, and well, I was hoping, because I hadn't got into it, I was hoping that the replication from PCSoft also worked, but it does work. It does do universal replication. It just does not handle some of the functions. Doesn't work in all of the mobile situations. So this is a good way to say it does work. Period. Okay. So this will be ready by DevCon. It will be a full-blown system on there, so everybody will be able to see how it works. And it ought to be pretty cool.
There you go.
I think so. I think that'd be pretty cool. Okay. Anyway, y'all be good or be good at it. I got a jet. And
okay.
Go from
we'll
there.
See you then. Thank you again. And Pete, thanks a lot too. Bye.
Bye.
Stopping the recording.